Entonces, buen día a todas y todos. Sean bienvenidas, sean bienvenidos a este nuestro segundo webinar de un ciclo de 5 sesiones que son parte de nuestro programa Urban by Nature, que se inscribe dentro del proyecto Clever Cities, que ustedes han venido siguiendo este ciclo formativo, este ciclo de exposiciones. Como saben,
presentations. As you know, this project, this Clever Cities project, is boosting a hub, a laboratory for nature-based solutions. It is a global program for leaders of cities, local governments, and other actors in the territory. They're promoting actions of urban nature in Latin America. Just to give you a small reminder, you will remember in history that we had a launch for our hub, our UrbanByNature laboratory, on the 19th and 20th of April in Quito, where hand in hand with many cities from Latin America and academia and civil organizations and national organizations that work for the advocacy and the analysis of nature-based solutions, we began a phase of training. And that's exactly what has brought us here today to the second webinar, where on one hand, we are interested in accompanying a methodological series that will allow attendees at these webinars to together and in common identify common risks and identify and adapt nature-based solutions within your public policy, and also have an approach in terms of how other cities managing this and how they're implementing that in their different contexts. So I think that this is the fundamental element and the thing that has brought us here today. So your cities have a great deal of experience and innovation in the adaptation of the biodiversity agenda within your climate action policy, but also that for sustainable development. And today, we're basically going to focus on one step of the Urban by Nature methodology, which consists of prioritizing and how we can prioritize within this wide framework of potential nature-based solutions, those that better adapt to our local context, going through, of course, both the filter of the context, but also our guidance, so city plans and government plans. The idea here is that the people who are following the webinar, but also our own cities that are here today, can identify how to establish basic indicators and results efforts that are related to the needs, to the resources, and important ones to incorporate this action within their public policy. So we're going to have a 1-hour schedule. I'm very grateful too, because we're going to have 3 very important presentations. The first will be our ally entity for the implementation of this hub of nature-based solutions in Latin America. Our allies from the consultancy firm Just Innovation, an organization with ample experience in Latin America under these themes. And we'll have an intervention from Grace Lopez, who will present how some of the priorities for this phase of the methodology have been established in a very concrete manner within the context of the city of Quito, specifically in the neighborhood San Enrique de Velasco, and also how to establish a plan linked to nature-based solutions in this neighborhood, and how this has allowed the community to benefit from certain knowledge and experiences. So that's one part. During another part of our debate, we will have a presentation from one of our star cities in Latin America, I would say, with regards to the planning and implementation of the biodiversity agenda within its government plans and within public policy. Our colleague from the city of Campinas in Brazil, Gabriel Neves, in the city of Campinas for reference, which is part of the state of Sao Paulo. It is a city with a significant metropolitan area as well, and he will be presenting an experience linked to linear parks in the city. Finally, we'll have another reference city. We know that our region is the most biodiverse in the world. We could almost claim that. And another city that's really done a lot in the biodiversity city is the city of San José in Costa Rica. Our colleague Emperatriz Ayerdis is going to show us and introduce how within the municipalities they are working on a strategy for the implementation of ecological corridors. What am I trying to say with all of this? Well, we are not just seeing how cities are being planned, but they're already not just how they're planning, but they're already implementing these solutions within their government and city action. Okay, first of all, I'd also like to give you a quick recap of everything that we've discussed in the other webinars, going back to the methodology that has been proposed in our Clever Cities project. I'd like you to give me a moment to show you a video that my colleagues from Clay America and Clay South America have prepared. I didn't introduce myself, sorry, my name is Braulio Diaz. I'm the regional manager for institutional relations and advocacy at eClay, South America. As you know, we are a global network of local governments and subnational governments that work together to promote 5 pathways for sustainable development based on people, which is resilient as well and low in carbon, with a significant bid for circular development, and above all, it should be biodiverse. This is our challenge. This is what we are all working on. Mariela, also I'd like to leave you so you can show us the video. Thank you very much.
It's time to try something new. Our current way of life has created an extremely critical situation. The Earth's climate is rapidly changing, and its ecosystems are suffering from a massive loss in biodiversity. Meanwhile, societies around the globe are facing the dangers of heat waves, air pollution, flooding, and mental health issues like anxiety and depression. But the good news is, nature itself can be the answer to many of the problems. Urban by Nature is a knowledge-sharing program created by eClay Europe within the Connecting Nature project. The program's purpose is to support the integration of nature-based solutions into communities of all shapes and sizes, metropolis or countryside. And nature-based solutions are exactly what they sound like, solutions inspired by nature. Let's take a public square as an example. What happens when we transform a sterile space into a green place full of life? When we give a wide variety of plants a place to grow, we increase biodiversity by providing homes for insects, which in turn attract birds and other animals. Plants also filter the air we breathe and reduce the carbon output of our cities. They help prevent flooding by capturing water and regulate microclimates that lower the high temperatures in a city. When cultivated on roofs and walls, plants even insulate buildings, which can reduce utility costs and fossil fuel consumption. And on top of all of that, such green spaces can provide a much-needed escape from the hustle and bustle of urban life. Of course, communities around the world have a long history of working with nature. By joining Urban by Nature, you find out what cities are doing today, implementing nature-based solutions. Our goal is to connect you with our global movement so that you can learn from and with one another how to better create urban spaces that treat nature as the solution and not the problem. Urban by Nature has active hubs all around the world, and we are growing. Thanks to people like you who want to positively impact the planet in their cities, communities, and beyond. Our online resources provide expert insights, tools, and methods that support you in planning and implementing nature-based solutions. And there's more. We will keep you updated on what's going on in our Urban by Nature hubs and let you know about upcoming events to connect you to what's happening globally and locally. Visit our website to sign up and follow us on social media to become part of a movement to lead communities toward their climate targets and benefit from the value the natural world already provides. At Urban by Nature, our participants are our experts. Be one of them.
Gracias, colegas.
Thank you so much, colleagues. In order to begin, let me tell you that this video is going to be available for all of you as well. If you had any problems with the sound connection, which is a bit cutting off, but it basically invites you, for you, all the representative cities, to join these activities of these hubs, especially the Latin American component. We are being led by the Quito Metropolitan District, which has actually bet strongly on promoting this agenda within Latin America. And I believe that this is this ideal scenario to begin to think about a technical vision, but with a political support as well, and provide local governments and different urban actors capacity so they can invest in urban-based solutions. This hub is the ideal space to promote horizontal dialogue amongst different stakeholders throughout the region. It should have a specialist support, strategic partners that allow us to actually see what we have done correctly in our cities and local governments throughout Latin America, but also the challenges that we have faced so that our biodiversity agenda will be a path for sustainable development. Very well. In order to actually begin our program with all of the expositions that we have today, I simply wanted to remind everyone that today we have simultaneous translation into 3 languages, English, Portuguese, and Spanish. It is marvelous. We are all connecting and we're learning how all of these tools actually work. So on our right side of the screen, you'll have a small little world icon for interpretation. And let me tell you where we come from. Obviously, we come from our workshop. That was that moment where we were led by the Metropolitan District of Quito, but together with the city of Santiago, Chile, Buenos Aires, Argentina, Guadalajara, Mexico, Sao Paulo, Brazil, San José, Costa Rica, Puerto Viejo, Santo Domingo, and many other cities throughout Latin America, Lima. We've been discussing how to focus certain actions and tendencies and trends, identify trends, and how these nature-based solutions are being implemented in our territories. And we designed a brief diagnosis based on all this. I don't want to extend myself too much, but we've realized that there's a general tendency to not give continuity to nature-based solutions within the projects and programs. It's necessary to connect with other spaces, other government and legislative entities, how to connect biodiversity within the climate change agenda with assignments of resources and improving technical capacities as well, plus conditions of the cities in order to develop projects for biodiversity and for nature-based solutions that allow us to have access to climate change financing. And also another very important challenge would be to create this narrative this community-based narrative in our territories about what it truly means and what it does not mean, what nature-based solutions means and does not mean. I think these actions for nature-based solutions, these are huge challenges. In our previous webinar, we presented 2 steps of this methodology that now we have 7. The first was to come together, to actually facilitate process, to join forces in order to commit to work in a nature-based solution agenda together. The second step of our previous webinar was to explore these conditions within our legal frameworks in order to implement nature-based solutions and creating more greener and resilient environments. And for this, we had the experiences from Hamburg, Buenos Aires, and Guadalajara. In this third webinar, as I was telling you, we will explore how we can prioritize and select certain actions adapted to our context and considering the challenges and opportunities that exist in our territory. Without further ado, I give the word to our colleague from Yes Innovation, Grace Jeffs, that will talk about the specific case in a neighborhood in Quito. Grace, thank you so much. And the word is yours. You have 10 minutes. Thank you so much, Braulio. You changed my last name twice. Okay, but I thank you so much for this invitation. Just confirm that you can see my screen. Yes? Perfect. Okay. They asked me to speak about this process of clever cities and how it's helping us, but especially to showcase what Braulio was mentioning about the need to co-design, because in Latin American cities, just like in others, but more specifically in ours, cities tend to have a very weak management model, and that management model has to be reinforced with a co-design process. Why co-design? Because in peri-urban neighborhoods, not only is there a need to see, but it's a need of everything. To talk about nature-based solutions in a peri-urban neighborhood sounds strange. And why not speak about these experiences? Because at the end, cities need to understand that this is a process and that this is not done just little by little, just in one time frame, but in a long time frame. And that is very important. And we also need to align ourselves to what we want to do. I think join together, as Braulio said, is not only joining, but understanding what we're trying to achieve as a team with our cities and our partner city, with Quito, and with all the people that we've been able to work, is to partner on these challenges and join together. This is Quito here. This is a city of more than 80 square kilometers by 5. And this is this peripheral neighborhood that perhaps nobody has seen this before, San Enrique de Velasco. And something within our city methodology, something that we have to do is the fact of being realistic with our cities and not saying that everything is good. No, because not everything is good. No. And once we become realistic, we understand the locations, the people, and we understand that perhaps there are ways of elevating what is done correctly. Here in Quito, we had a contest in 2018 where the neighborhoods started to showcase their work. And the first phase was for the architectures to join together with the neighborhoods and generate these action plans. This model is very useful to understand how to go further. Working with people is also understanding what people are interested in. And when we speak about nature-based solutions, we have to build awareness because the people are surrounded by nature in Latin America, but they don't really understand nature's role. In the case of this neighborhood, as you see, this is a green island where the creeks that you see here are not a worry to the people really if they don't have a big flooding or anything of that nature. But there are other like these social borders that allow people to forget about what happens in humanistic terms. Look at this neighborhood, for example, we have this type of nature. So we have to build awareness and lead people toward that wave that we saw earlier, that biodiversity wave that we need to work on. Collective intelligence is to understand how people actually work together, but also give people tools. I think we have to come in with tools to prioritize. People need to have imagination. And when we imagine, as you see here, we also have to sit with people to understand each location in not a general fashion, because if not, we fall into those traps that never become something real. The imagination allows us to see where people are most interested in working and where not. And we have to respect that as well. Nonetheless, we have to understand that we have to generate these working nucleuses that not only work to showcase the work, but also to actually win. In this case, this neighborhood won this contest. It was brought happiness to the neighborhood. The neighborhood understood that it can be an example to other neighborhoods. And when I say this is so that people can understand that they can go further. We came in with the Clever City project. However, here we have a budget. But for example, we thought that now in the projects, we always have to have a little bit of budget in order to implement things. And since we're a city, as you can see in this very rich universe of exchanges, we need to understand what we do in Quito in this particular case. So this question of what to do in Quito with all of these backgrounds led us to speak with the different local stakeholders, but not only speak, but to understand their practices as well, speak with the academic sector and understand their practices as well. And as Braulio said in the introduction, speaking with people is also to understand the legal frameworks. In order to prioritize, we need to understand legal frameworks, but not from just reading it, but from the living of the different stakeholders that generate public policies. Having read all the documents that these laws actually have for us to understand how our neighborhood in this specific case can actually enter and begin to speak about nature-based solutions. With this idea in mind, we started to speak about standards and norms. And as you can see, it might seem very remote, but we talked about public space standards and private space standards. And there's where people can come into play. This information allowed people, as you can see, that the neighborhood not only was a neighborhood, it was not only in Clever Cities, but it started the climate change Quito reference as well. So it became a transition model as well. And I tell you this because at the end of the day, this neighborhood is that little bird, and we try to make this beauty larger. And working with people is to come in and explain this new challenge that Clever brought us. We had certain actions that we did with people based on all this historical data. We worked in order to understand what we should prioritize. We started to speak with building awareness to try to understand as we had to take people to see other local practices, to speak with other stakeholders and peers so they can understand different challenges and different problems so that they can be motivated. And then the pandemic hit us. And during the pandemic, we had to find new ways of working. Nonetheless, also supporting that, perhaps not seeing the people that those farms that wait, that the people that understand that they can actually work together and accomplish new things. We had a farming fair as well. And this led us to another co-creation phase to be able to speak about the project itself, what the project can actually become in my house, in my streets, in my space, and then my neighborhood as a whole. We generated these projects together with the people, and based on this, we tried to create from our side and showcase different examples so that these examples can be discussed and argued upon. We created roadmaps to understand who was doing what, how we were working, and the people that began to build more awareness and started to understand that they were in a territory where they can actually work. We generated this type of element so that people can actually become focalized on our problem. This is the San Enrico de Velasco street. The people wanted to prioritize this because this is a street in the land. As you can see, there are some large, almost like creeks that form when there's rivers, because this is above 2,800 meters above sea level. So it was a very specific street. Having a specific objective allows people to actually come in and understand what they truly need. But look, this is the norm that they had at that location. And we started to come in and talk about the legal framework and the city framework. In this neighborhood, we're not allowed to put a tree. We couldn't. And a tree that's planted, we cannot really have it in the location because the streets are not actually there's no space for these. But with the people that worked on these workshops and understanding what they wanted in their location and understanding the how of working, they also understood that we can have a partnership in nature while the other things arrive. So we created certain plans, we created certain ways of trying to understand how this can actually come about. And this became very important because we started to try to work and with very little resources. In the case of Quito, we didn't have a lot of money, but we try to find private resources, private money to come in with an idea and with a project so that people could begin to actually see changes and build awareness. The people started to participate we actually started this project, and we had the fortune of having many good neighbors, and especially the work of each of the different stakeholders that participated. They understood that they can do it from what we know how to do at a local level without very high technology, and also building awareness of what plants are for, and that they can actually be an ally for us, and also to show this low cost solution that in Latin America we have to make it accessible. We cannot just wait and depend on costly issues. And then we created these gardens to improve the streets that no longer have those little creeks that flood or that flooding, but to avoid many risks that happen. And we didn't know what was going to happen with this. And this technology actually allowed the people themselves to adopt harmonious solutions and monitor solutions with easy tools. The people need easy tools in order to love the implementation that they are performing. We created some workshops with children as well to work on the second point that people prioritize. But this allowed children to realize that in their neighborhood, they didn't really have nature, to build awareness that perhaps they only had a little bit of grass and maybe a few bushes, but it allows us to speak about native trees, people that work with nature, with animals, flora, fauna, etc. And with this, we go on to the next phase, precisely the heart of this, and to work with the nucleus in a different fashion, to understand different ways of doing things, co-designing things, see how children can actually provide ideas so that their parents can put those into practice. And we had several workshops. And as you can see here, this game is not like it's not like a swing. I wanted something that allows me to work with trees. And we started to understand with this image what it actually means to co-design for the people that will come after me. And this allowed us to relaunch, together with our colleagues from the municipality, to relaunch. This is precisely a meeting that we had just a little while back to synchronize our efforts and these challenges that are coming next, understanding that we want these projects to flourish, to leave San Enrique, to go elsewhere as well. But we also have to come in as an actor here. Here is the place where we work and where we live, and how we have actually started to transform it. And with this idea of speaking about projects, of speaking about prototypes, about speaking about permissions, allowing us to experiment so this can be a low-cost local solution. This allows for each element that can be generated with this idea of using nature-based solutions to clean water, like you see on the left side, to filter, to produce, to have comfort, as you can see in this nature-based roof that we can work on with our master colleagues, and also how the house, inside the house, can live with a green space. This also allowed us to have an association or a partnership with the people to create a tree-based solution that perhaps would have never arrived in our streets without this. And this is what I want to end with. I think that this comes from the municipality. We see the needs to actually launch this purpose, but it also comes from the municipalities, the objective of generating or coming up with resources, sufficient resources, so that people, well, first of all, or the communities can actually get ahead and showcase their best practices and actually jump in on these best practices, understand how nature-based solutions are useful for specific problems for these communities, that they can truly understand the need, because it will be them that will take care of it, that the monitoring system shouldn't be an impossible thing to follow. And it should also be transferable to common people, not fearing the public-private partnership. Let's not fear that. And let's not fear public academic partnerships, but not do this as in a binary fashion, not make it expensive, so that this seed of changing the city in terms of resilience becomes becomes a stronger point and more interesting for the cities. I think we have to summarize the fact of co-designing and of generating interests in people, perhaps with these contests that make these things more evident, and create tools so that people can visualize something that they normally cannot visualize, and try to understand the priorities, not what we believe their priority is, but what the people want. For example, in this neighborhood, the people thought that that it was asphalt, it was actually better. But then leaving the seed in their minds that there was a different way of doing this thing requires funds to actually build awareness and to be able to truly implement small prototypes so people can actually understand how nature works in our context. Norms become very complex sometimes in cities. They become something that ties you up. The fact that you have territories that you can experiment and can actually be told amongst peers and see different achievements becomes something very successful. And I wanted to end with this, and I wanted to thank you for all the time that you have given me. And I wanted to invite you to the cities, as Braulio said, to generate these dynamics based on the value being placed on the community so that the management model will be more sustainable from a community perspective. Thank you, Braulio. That was it. Grace, thank you so much. And I am not going to call you a different last name from this point on. Yepes is your last name. Don't worry about it. Well, I think you left us a very interesting mouth opener. And you also talk about those huge common challenges that we have as municipalities to co-design, to work jointly, not only with our citizens that we see, which is a great example. And it's important to have our citizens take ownership of this, yes, but the question is also important of how do we incorporate different sectors like the private sectors, how do we incorporate different academic sectors, different organizations to think about these types of solutions, collective solutions. And I think that the very important word, apart from co-design and prioritization, would be innovation. Innovation in public policies, not necessarily linked to technological solution, or not only linked to technological solutions. And I think that's very important to include that in this agenda for biodiversity, to include all these actions and place them on a package filled with experience and make them available so that our colleagues in Latin America will learn about them and can use them. I simply wanted to say something else, which I think is important for all the different cities that are participating today. It's the fact that in the upper commands, sometimes they're not related to the things that happen in the territory, in the neighborhoods. And when you go down and speak to the actual people, the common people, or like from the cities or from municipalities to understand how people work, how things work, we realize that there's also a need to communicate as well, that cities will allow their technicians to also maybe violate the law sometimes in one way or another for the good, in a good sense of the word. And it's important for cities to understand that what we know how to do as a city up to this moment is not something that's a roadblock. I think we need to innovate as well. I think so that we can understand about nature. I think it becomes super important because the community is already being built awareness. The most important is already being done. Precisely, it's between the most important, the smallest thing that is still missing. That's what I wanted to talk about. Perfect. And let's say it's not only to violate the law in a good sense, but it's all working on other skills and competences that we have in our cities. Those are our new great challenges. Grace, I simply ask you if you can support us in answering a question. It's also written to go on from a question from Francisco is in the chat. And ask us your question in a chat, put them on a chat. I encourage you to do so. Our participants will respond, and we'll take advantage of this time with this mouth opener that you left us, Grace. Now we want to give the word over to our city, as I told you, of how to integrate nature in our urban setting. The city of Brazil, Campinas. I have the fortune to have our colleague and friend Gabriel Neves to accompany us, which is a person and that is very committed with these types of actions. And this is he has a linear park objective and connectivity in the city of Campinas, Brazil. Thank you, Gabriel. Yeah, you can speak in Portuguese without a problem.
Okay, Gabriel, thank you very much. You can speak in Portuguese. Thank you, Braulio. It's great to speak Portuguese because I don't think you'd understand my Portuñol at all. Thank you for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen. And if it's not in presentation mode, please let me know. Is it not on presentation mode? Not yet.
Ainda não está?
Não, não está.
Okay, I think you'll have to show them one by one. Is it still not up? No, it's still not up. There's an issue. Slightly bigger, perhaps. Yes, please make it a little bit bigger.
Sim.
Sometimes these things happen.
Pouquinho mais calor aí do que aqui no estado de São Paulo.
Okay.
Como o Braulio já nos disse, sou Gabriel Neves, trabalho na Secretaria de Meio Ambiente aqui de Campinas.
It's as we were saying here in Sao Paulo, I work at the Environment Secretariat in Campinas. But I want to talk about how we authorize sectoral planning.
Para quem não conhece, Campinas tem aproximadamente 800 quilômetros.
Those of you who don't know Campinas, it has approximately 800 kilometers square kilometers, more than 1,100,000 inhabitants. It's part of the metropolitan region of Campinas. It has 20 municipalities with more than 3 million inhabitants, which represents 9% of the GDP of the state of Sao Paulo, the metropolitan region within the state of Sao Paulo. Okay, so the first step shows us that environmental planning must understand the territory. So the diagnosis of the territory is the most important thing. Campinas is not indifferent to this. The plan for Campinas makes us different to most of the municipalities in Latin America, where there was not much adequate planning done, and it accompanied the rural exodus and the increase in the urban population. Despite that, Campinas maintains a certain number of green spaces, which is reasonably high. We have 700 meters per inhabitant, 700 meters of green spaces, so 87 square meters, and generally the connections between citizens and these networks are differentiated by green areas, which you can see have been divided on the map, and they're predominantly near the city. They are mainly fragments of a forest that still exist, but we can see that they're greatly fragmented and they're scattered around the territory. When we talk about green areas for social ends, they are mainly located around the urban area, and as well as the ecological characteristic, it's also associated to public use through promotion and different formulas. There we can understand that there is no division or exclusion of the urban area, and the number of inhabitants is very low. This is an ECLAIS study. We have this number of meters per inhabitant, so 87 square meters. To understand this distribution in these green areas, we have also social areas in different with different urban neighborhoods. We believe more than 73% of those areas did not have any social work done. There's more or less a 30-minute walk for access to green spaces. Each inhabitant has access. There are areas where there is no adequate access for these spaces. So we'd like to show you a little bit about what this means here. When we see on the map, we can see the darker stains on the map. And this means that this population living in these areas are the furthest away possible from the green areas. And if we use projections regarding population increase, over the last 10 years. From 2015 or 16, there were no green areas in these meters squared, and it would be lower still at 5.3% if it wasn't for everything that was done. That's why we created the municipal green space plan for linear parks. These are open spaces along the riverside of the rivers. And we have this linear park concept to guarantee that we preserve, recover, and maintain biodiversity in secondary areas and connect them via natural fragments. But we also produce social measures, so we promote activities such as leisure, sports, and circulation, motorless circulation, also walks,
atuando como
the promotion of environmental education, improving the quality of people's lives, and also promoting the mitigation of issues in the city with regards to climate emergencies, increasing the stability of the soil, and guaranteeing that there are spaces where natural areas can be improved, but also the quality of air and microclimate is considered too. With this, with our program, until 2025, we will be implementing 29 areas distributed around the cities, making sure that these green areas have social functions. So we can see this represented on the map, an urban area with projections for this year. We started a planning role to transform the territory. The first step was to incorporate and recover green areas in the city. So in these linear parks in the map of the territory, we call them a direct plan. In Campinas, they adopted the linear green parks for conservation with a guiding plan, with the aim of keeping the city or keeping this part of the city green. This made it possible for Campinas to enable the Secretariat of Environment so that they could have legislation for new kind of startups, so that these areas in the parks could be so that they could be stakeholders for the implementation of any new measures. And so it was compulsory to implement that in the plan and work with the Secretariat based on technical criteria from the Environment Secretariat, but also the Public Service Secretariat that is in charge of later maintaining the equipment of the Transport Secretariat that takes care of mobility, the Accessibility Secretariat as well, with an idea of multidisciplinarity to be able to provide conservation. And with that, we have some images and examples of 2 linear parks that have already been implemented via our system. And we also have 16 basic projects and projects that are already in place. In public areas, people are in charge of maintaining quality, and through the Environmental Fund, a technical viability study was performed with a socio-environmental diagnosis for each region so that these linear parks could work, and also proposing a conceptual park for the implementation of these parks with a preliminary budget. This implementation is taking place through environmental compensation in the municipal license process. The municipal budget, by the use of this budget, the City Hall could be convinced to use the parks for this end. So there is some public policies where we look at the perspective for children's parks for children. So there are territorial plans, mobility plans, and others, and a series of other departments and other systems from the public area. We're working with national and transnational organizations. I've brought some examples here. ICLE and Campinas were selected in 2020 for this program, as well as City Climate, which elaborated a project for parks by associations to seek funding at the international level. So we have a few figures here, 43 linear parks with proposals for planting. Over 50% have already got some measures in place where they're planting trees and different kinds of equipment. We have also hired 6 projects for linear parks. As I said, the programs TAP, ICLE are implementing 8 linear parks, and we're elaborating a basic project. We've already started the impact project to plant new entrepreneurships there. And this is an image of one of our linear parks that was implanted via the private line. And so they planted linear plants, but there are also interactive measures for sports and entertainment. With these programs, we understand that we are making this multidisciplinary approach of the project more visible, as well as all the actors in the City Hall and the different secretariats as well, including the private sector, and primarily the local population is involved. When I say local population, besides planning for the city, there is also the implementation of linear parks in certain neighborhoods as such. Therefore, this integrates the participation of society and Brazilian associations, municipal associations. It's a very modern plan that needs to be participatory. And we have quite a bit of progress to make. In 2006, work was done in the intersectoral offices within the green plans, and also all the way to the public policies and at the federal level, as well as the municipal level, with the participation of civil society. We made progress in a technical viability study as well to collect the demands of the local population for these sectors, where we wanted to have linear parks. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we were unable to collect many, and so we used social media to be able to do this, to gather support. Then, during the elaboration of the project, we decided to implement technical services for agreement through working groups, starting with an initial proposal for public parks with the demands of our population. And the last point is our greatest challenge: to work with shared management, which is really important to maintain these public areas alongside the local population, which has a greater interest in them, so they can have a sense of belonging. So they're not just part of a local audience, but rather the entire population is using that public space too. And just to end, our idea is that, we need to bring these ideas and these measures to the municipalities or to other places, even other regions. And what connects the metropolitan region and these municipalities for implementation is that green line that I'd like to leave with you here. And I'd like to explain that entire process as well, maybe another time, but the implementation of these linear parks to guarantee connectivity in urban areas, we try to share initiatives and evidence and challenges with different municipalities so that the linear parks of Campinas can be replicated in other municipalities, but also so we can bring in the experiences of those other municipalities. This is a quick image that shows the idea of including other interested parties or stakeholders in the process. One of the main items is active communication, and it should be easier as well. If we have a map when we're going to share things, a connectivity map with all the natural areas and also a kind of summary to explain this process. To end, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. I think I've spoken quite a lot. It has been a pleasure to introduce Campinas, and I also heard Grace's experience from Quito.
Em português.
And we can learn a lot more. These are my contact details. The web pages are in Portuguese. We've placed all the information and documents we have there,
Dentro do projeto Go Green,
as well as a YouTube video that is part of an association within that project. That project in Campinas, where we explained the entire process, the implementation of these linear parks in the Campinas municipality. Thank you very much. Okay, I think this experience, as we discussed with Grace, has brought us a vision about how we can work with other actors as well, especially when it comes to licensing and also with private bodies. I think this is an experience that we can rescue from all of this and can serve as inspiration for other cities in Latin America, which also have similar competencies. So I think you've definitely given us a general overview that is quite extensive and provocative regarding connectivity areas, and it is without a doubt a topic that we can address again at another time. And I think that these very concrete examples of how cities prioritize alongside other actors. Finally, okay, we have little time left. It's always a challenge, but I have the pleasure to give the floor to the coordinator of the program Cuencas Hidrográficas, Hydrographic Basins in San José, Costa Rica, Gabriela Sanchez Ibaja. And she is going to talk about the strategy that is being prioritized in the city of San José for ecological corridors. Gabriela, we have 10 minutes. Once again, please place any questions in the chat and we will continue. Good morning. Thank you very much for this invitation. Can you see my presentation? Yes, it looks perfect. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to start. How much time do I have? Just to make sure it's short. We have 10 minutes, Gabriela. Okay. At the municipality of San Jose, we have been working since 2012 on a strategy that will allow us to work in cities. And this is how we began with the interurban ecological corridors for the construction of green cities. How was this initiative born? It was born in 2011 through a resolution of the City Hall, because this municipality manages 3 hydro basins. So we are surrounded by urban rivers. So at the time, we didn't know how we could involve them in our work at the municipal level and not turning our backs on the rivers in the city. This is why we created an interinstitutional and interdisciplinary committee. We started as a municipality to call partners working in the central canton of San Jose and academia and other institutions. And in this case, we worked with a pilot microbasin, the River Torres, the basin of River Torres integrated 4 municipalities, and that's why they've been mapped out here. But besides this small commission that we started to work with in this strategy where we had to start from scratch, it became an interinstitutional and interdisciplinary process that fostered governance processes that are so important for this construction. The legal framework, well, we had a legal framework 38071, the creation of the commission for the Committee of the Basin of the river. So 37 municipalities were asked to work to benefit these basins. And then in 2017, we were able to create a decree 40043, where for the first time we typify the concept of interurban biological corridors, and it is declared of public interest. We had a few important items that we had to create. First of all, the concept, guidelines for minimum compliance that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Capital, so talking about the concept of green sections, ecosystemic services, and a network of interurban corridors. We always saw that there were interlinked urban corridors and also the restoration program. So the biological corridors in 1995 started to be worked on. So this concept of biological corridors. At the time, the country was paying more attention to rural areas. So biological corridors would connect protected areas of wildlife. In the city, it wasn't so easy to connect to these areas. And that's why we created the interurban biological corridor concept, which intends to connect these green areas. So we could, the more rural areas could be called biological corridors and the more urban ones could be IBCs. So what is the green section? It's a union of all the green areas in the city, so they are kind of lanes or roads that have trees. And when we were looking at so many trees, we had to integrate protection, areas of protection. This is how they are typified in the country, and they're generally on the banks of the river. So they could be areas with parks for children, or normal parks, or little squares as well. We wanted to also recover kind of the railway line, which has been used for waste. And interconnection is an interurban biological corridor. And we also have other corridor initiatives that are going to make up the network of interurban biological corridors. It's important to mention something that I didn't mention. The minimum unit of an interurban biological corridor is a microbasin. This is why these IBCs are a land planning and environmental tool in these processes. The minimum guidelines for compliance are as follows. You have the ecological dimension, you have indicators under that, then we have the dimensions of water resources, the dimension of solid waste, the dimension of governance and management, and the socioeconomic and cultural dimensions. So all of these dimensions have specific indicators to them. This is an example of tree planting, a very wonderful park called Parque España. This is the national park. We've recently quantified the ecosystemic services by the iTree tool. So we have these details for 10 urban parks. We have rivers that connect people as well, the program. I love this term because interurban biological corridors, or IBCs, are managed by local committees. And local committees are made up of institutions, academia, the community, and NGOs. This is the network of interurban biological corridors. As you can see, we've got all the little green pathways here, this green fabric that we want to establish in the city. So this is what it means to strengthen the green corridors. We have the River Taurus, we have another micro basin here, and the idea is to join them and create this, or weave the social, this green fabric in the city. What do we want to achieve through the IBCs? We want to establish sustainability indexes in urban regions that we don't have in the country at the moment by connecting these green areas to wildlife areas that are protected and close to the metropolitan area. We can maximize ecosystemic services. We can foster work as a point of integration with other governmental entities. Sometimes it's difficult to work with other municipalities, but these biological corridors will provide the space through local committees. Also, the elaboration of important public policies, which is really important, especially in urban areas in our countries. Urban areas have improved, biodiversity has improved, but mostly in rural areas. So we need to work a lot on that in urban areas. The identification of biological connectivity routes, that's super important, and also the possibility to comprehensively manage the landscape. This is a map that I wanted to show you. It's a network of interurban biological corridors. Those that are green are already biological corridors that have been established and approved and also made official by the Ministry of Environment. The one in yellow is being approved and the red ones are being elaborated. As you can see, we have established that green fabric. We have built that green fabric as of 2017 when the decree was established. But before that, we did the entire methodology to build these interurban biological corridors. Ecosystemic services in the green section, regulation of climate, reduction in noise levels, reduction of erosion, among others. It's important to mention this as well. The IBCs, interurban biological corridors versus quality of life. So cities are 2% of the surface of the planet. Its inhabitants use 75% of its national resources. According to the FAO, in 2050, 70% of the population of the world will live in cities or villages. It is fundamental to promote the development of sustainable cities, guaranteeing thus the quality of life of the urban population. This is a diagram that I really liked, linked to the construction of sustainable cities. It implies that they should be resilient, green, intelligent, or smart, have good governance, and they should be inclusive as well. So as of last year, our country has been working on a national strategy for the construction of green cities. And finally, tree planting is the only contact that citizens have with nature. So thank you very much. Sorry for running. It was due to the amount of time we had. And this is my email address in case you need anything. If you have any queries or you need any information that you'd like to request on this methodology, this innovative methodology, we will gladly send it to you. Thank you very much. No, Gabriela, that was excellent. Thank you. And you've left us with a great desire to get to know this methodology in detail for identification, but also with the indicators as well that you mentioned, because that's a very important part of this theme, of this step, of this methodology, of the nature-based solutions, to prioritize the creation of objectives, aims, and specific indicators, concrete indicators, with regards to the needs and available resources of the territories. I think that these compliance guidelines are fundamental to keep moving forward with the adequate implementation of the biological corridor and also all other actions that you specify to us. And it complements the other two interventions really well, so both Gabrielle's and Grace's. So it is a true joy for us at ICLE, Europe and South America to be in contact with you and to be able to learn from these great experiences and accompany you, as in the case of Campinas, where we have a very strong partnership. Thank you very much to the Metropolitan District of Quito as well, which is an indispensable ally for our agenda. And we believe that with their leadership and the leadership of the city of San Jose, we can disseminate these actions for other cities to enjoy. And I mean, they also have a purpose. They benefit our our environment and also the quality of life of our citizens. So with that, I would like to say goodbye. We will soon send all the participants a small report of the main ideas with the presentations of our speakers for this week or of this edition of the webinar. And please remember that we have a new date for the discussion of step 4. So on the 6th of October, I believe, and my colleagues from ICLE Europe and ICLE South America will soon receive this news. 42 people and 50 people we had during the session. This means that we have a group that is very interested in this agenda. So thank you very much. Have a great evening, and let's continue with our activities for the day. Kind regards to you all.